sounds of it.
Yeah, I think it's contact with you as well. Yes.
I was going to ask a few questions about I think it's pretty cool, obviously it's some very good feedback.
Okay. Thank you. Good evening, councillors.
Good evening.
Welcome to this meeting of the Finance and General Purposes Committee on the 22nd of April, the eve of St George's Day. Item 1 is apologies for absence.
Thank you, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Peter Breen due to a personal commitment.
Number 2 is declarations of interest. To receive any declarations of disclosable pecuniary interest from members in respect to business to be transacted on the agenda. Anyone wish to declare anything? Item 3, minutes of the Finance and General Purposes Committee held on the 19th of February 2024, and to consider any matters arising from those minutes not covered elsewhere in the agenda. That's attachment 1. So, do we have any matters arising on those minutes? Any matters arising? Councillor Zuka? Zuka,
I
sorry.
was just going to refer to the action log that Town Clerk has kindly handed out. There's a couple of them that propose for closure, so I just wanted to make sure that we know them as closing if we agree.
Which are?
So the first actually captured a number of actions, but under one heading around the bulwarks and Polder Gardens play area. So in effect, we've now got a project underway regards the bulwarks. We've also agreed that we're going to enter into an SLA with DDC from 25-26. To include Polder's Garden. So I think all, in essence, of those actions we can now close. They'll be managed elsewhere.
Do you think we could just rehearse the funding for that project? Because I know it's been talked about in the past. I think it would be worth publicising that for the public generally, so that they know that we are making a significant contribution. So it's 30,000 from the
DDC. 15,000
from Southern Water,
and the remainder, which I think is 13,300.
About 13,700, is it?
700, okay.
Yeah, I think.
From ourselves.
from STC.
Yeah.
Do you think we could put out a social media notice just to emphasise that?
Yeah.
It's useful information.
The consultation's due to start soon, Colin, so that might be a good hook for giving a wraparound in terms of the project itself. And then the second one relates to the working group producing worksheets for each asset, including Bay Hall. Well, we've accepted that as one of our requirements within that working group. In any case, I don't think it's an action that needs to be separately managed because we're providing updates into this meeting.
Just on that point, the assets officer role, which is critical to that piece of work, is that coming to the town council next week?
I wasn't getting, I'm not have capacity to do that. I wanted to seek a Human Resources Committee meeting just to clarify the job description and the specification, which I hope to do when I can arrange a date with the mayoress.
But can we go ahead and advertise, or does it need council approval?
Well, yeah, we will need council approval, but that's where I really need the Human Resources Committee.
It needs
or
to
somebody
really go by
to
the HR committee first, just to confirm criteria really.
I'm just worried about ongoing delays. Perhaps STC next week could give HR committee delegated authority just to crack on with that.
I can put that as a report, yes.
because otherwise we'll be into June, July.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm.
Yeah, okay.
Next one. Is that it?
That's 2 of 2.
Okay, 2 of 2. I know it's recommended here that the old Facebook page be closed, but I'm concerned that that page still exists.
It does.
It's still there with the STC crest and logo.
It is.
I just don't think that's acceptable. I don't know what other people think.
It isn't acceptable.
No, but we did discuss it at the last committee meeting and we agreed then to close it. Letters have been sent, conversations have been had. I don't know what else you can do apart from more formal stuff.
Is it possible to contact Facebook?
It's a waste of time.
And so that has been done.
That's been done.
Yeah.
Okay.
No, I did notice a comment on Facebook about the town council website from Taylor Grimes. Not the website, rather the Facebook page. Making a point about how there have been over 1,000 members of the previous Facebook page, and now there are only 51. Or in fact, there are many more than that in the proper town council. But clearly, it's a battle that continues.
I mean, he is a
Very
well-known.
unfortunate.
He is a well-known avatar, shall I say?
You know who he is then, do
Yes,
We can guess.
you? Oh. See? Oh.
I suppose the only next step is a legal letter to the administrator of that site. We'll discuss with the.
There's a cost to that, isn't there? That's the only trouble.
But there's a reputational issue as well for this
There
town
is.
council that thing is still out there, and all kinds of things could be being posted there, and people are seeing it as if it's our property, which it's not.
No, I mean, if you search for Sandwich Town Council on Facebook, that's the page you get.
Isn't there an intellectual property right? Because the only people that are allowed to use the Sandwich Town Council logo, the Sandwich Town Council. So it's actually intellectual property rights that could be a possible target. That may be an area to explore.
It's a good point. I think
And copyright, yeah.
we'll discuss with the town clerk and see if there's maybe a letter from the town clerk threatening a legal letter.
We'll find it's only you and I.
Okay, but I think it's clear that we're unhappy about that
We are.
Facebook page still being in existence. Okay, anything else on this log? Anything else in the minutes? So is anyone willing to propose the minutes for acceptance?
Happy to propose the minutes.
Second.
All those in favour?
Yeah.
So those minutes are received and
Thank you.
approved?
Yes, thank you.
I see. Right, the next item is item 4, public participation. 20-minute session set aside for members of the public to make representations. Do we have anyone?
No requests.
No requests, okay. Item 5, allotments update. Town clerk to share a verbal update on the progress with the allotment sites that are managed by STC. These are St Bart's, commonly known as Black Lane, and Sandown Road, next to the tennis courts.
Yes, thank you, Chair. This is a very brief update, just to let you know that the renewals have all been sent out by the assistant clerk. We do have now the majority of the fees paid, which is good news. and we are now working towards organising a meeting with the allotment plot holders. We have met briefly with Councillor Franklin and Councillor Wiles to talk about the allotments and how we would like to progress to more formal arrangements, hopefully working towards a nice community plot, certainly on one site, and getting some documentation a bit more regularised. So that meeting should be happening beginning to mid-May. So we'll be getting out the invitations later this week to the allotment plot holders. Thank you.
When we met, we spoke about the importance of allotments. I remember a certain district councillor telling me when I was first elected, all we do here is allotments and write letters. So to some extent the allotments are one of our main activities, and they do have an important role in terms of, you know, healthy eating, communities, well-being, but I think they could be better managed. They are a big asset. The Black Lane allotments is a big site which potentially could be under threat from development if it's not properly cultivated and used. But they have huge potential for other community uses. So the school is next door. There could be a school plot with a pond and, you know, activities that kids could be involved in. There could be a plot associated with a Jubilee Centre where people can grow food. I was a plot holder in Cambridge for 20 odd years, and we had our own building on the site and our own committee that managed the site. So one of the plot holders would be the manager, and he would look at new entrants and give them maybe a quarter plot to start them off, because some people take on a whole plot and they get discouraged, the weeds grow. So you start slow and build up if people are keen. And that worked perfectly well. And also we had a building where we could have meetings, where we could sell seeds and equipment and compost, and, you know, people could chat and meet each other. We'd have an annual barbecue party on the site. So there's lots of potential there for both sites. And I think the starting point for this is to have a meeting of plot holders, because I think there has been a lot of resistance to self-management in the past. If I can mention the kind of old guard who have always done things the way they've always been done. But perhaps with new people coming in, we could have a different approach and, you know, start to realise the potential of these sites.
Yeah, because we did it quite thoroughly a couple of years ago, you know, the town clerk, because they can do their own funding as well, you know.
Yeah.
So it's quite keen that, you know, a full meeting of those that turned up, and they just didn't want to know. But it's no harm to try it again, hopefully go ahead. We thought then it was a good idea to have their own little building, bulk purchase seeds and different things, but fertiliser, it all saves money and everyone else.
And I think it's difficult to manage that from here. It makes much more sense for it to be self-managed on the site, and for the town clerk and the assistant town clerk to take a more of an admin overview rather than being involved in day-to-day management.
Yes, I've seen a management committee formed by the plot holders, some of whom were councillors, working very well. It's true, it doesn't completely remove the workload from the council staff, but it makes it a lot easier, and it means that the plot holders are taking decisions together. I'm not aware if there's a long waiting list at the moment, but that was another issue in your idea of bringing in someone just on a quarter plot and seeing how they manage this. It sounds very sensible.
There is a waiting list, and I think the waiting list acts as a kind of incentive to people to manage their plots, because you can say, look, there's people waiting for this, please get your act together, otherwise we'll have to give you notice. I think the other thing to mention with both these sites is the potential for wildlife. You know, they are mini nature reserves. I've found slow worms, there's all kinds of nesting birds, lizards, you know, and that could be increased if we have ponds and, you know, look at natural habitats for wildlife as well. So especially as now Blackpool is now surrounded by housing, it is a kind of oasis within that urban area.
Yeah, Chair, one of the things we did do was the mayor had all the plots, no names, and did like a biennial, or not biennial, he did a walk round, in say the late spring, early, and then later on after harvesting, and we used to have an annual meeting, and just used to look for the best plot. So I think that'd be quite a good thing to do for the mayor to walk round, only twice a year.
Yeah, you can have all kinds of things like that.
And it just gives them an incentive to make sure it's nice and tidy.
The biggest cucumber, the
Yeah.
largest onion, so that you can sell or give away, surplus produce. There's lots of potential. Okay, so the next step on that is a meeting of all the plot holders, which I'm happy to chair, or one of us can chair, and then take it forward.
Councillor South be happy to come along.
Yeah.
And notify them.
So
Can I just suggest that we might mention the sandwich pantry for surplus, because
Yeah.
they're always
absolutely. Okay. Right, so that meeting will be sometime in early May. Item 6 is update on priorities for the Finance and General Purposes Committee. To receive an update and to note. So this is attachment 2. So are there any items on there which any member wishes to highlight or comment on?
I wonder if it would be useful to actually put some dates in here, because some of the things are well in hand or have been completed, and I'm getting a bit lost as to which is current and which is complete. So either, a colour code or date. I'm assuming that the green is your colour code that it is complete.
Correct.
But some of the others I was a little bit confused about just where we are, but then that could be me.
So yellow highlighting indicates the latest update that was against that action.
Okay,
And the
okay,
green means that the action
Complete.
is complete. Yeah.
okay, that's helpful.
Okay.
Okay, so any comments? Could I just ask the website, what's your view on how that's functioning? There was an issue about documents all being separate.
Yes, so I've managed to overcome that now. So I've got a PDF software that we haven't had to pay for, and I've managed to actually merge PDF documents. So the latest agenda, museum and archive, you'll see that it's one PDF. Yeah. And I've also updated the website so that the calendar at the bottom on the home page, if somebody's looking for the next meeting and the documents, you just scroll to the bottom of the home page and it will show you the calendar, and then you can click on the meeting and it will take you straight to the documents, so you don't have to go through looking for the committees or the council or the Scottish Fund.
Okay, good.
Can I ask a question about the website? Because the website allows for the facility for people to write in with queries.
Yes.
And I just wonder how that's going, because it's a hostage to fortune really, that 100 people could write in a week, and I don't know how that work is being handled.
So currently it's been handled predominantly by the administrator office reception, but some of them do come through to me. It depends on how complex the inquiry is. So I have seen them myself, but it's not necessarily, I'm not dealing with all of them by any stretch.
No, but are they taking up a lot of time?
Well, yeah, they are taking up time. The same as resident inquiries that are coming, face to face, phone calls. But the person that is on the front line is down in the reception. They're the ones dealing with the majority of those.
So quite a few of these are the responsibility of the Finance and Assets Working Group, which is an ongoing project. Anything else to raise? You happy to note this? Yes.
Yeah.
Agree.
Propose noting this report.
Second. All those in favour of noting? Okay, so that is noted. Item 7 is the Feastival feedback survey. town clerk share a report, and this was a survey done by our visitor information and reception. So what's the exact title?
Oh, sorry, yes,
Lindsay.
yes, administrator, reception,
Yeah.
yes,
So this went out on social media
yes.
and was publicised on the website and our Facebook pages. I think we had 70 or more responses.
Yes,
Yeah, there were 2 paper responses,
Yeah.
so there were people active on the paper as well.
So, just as the background to this, you'll remember that this was a private company that asked to have the forecourt on a weekend that otherwise would have been empty in February, I think it was.
Yes.
There was some,
Oh, sorry, March, it was March.
sorry, March, yeah. There was some adverse commentary about it, but we said, okay, let's do it and see how it goes. And I think generally the feedback has been fairly positive. I mean, my view of the company is that they put together a very clever arrangement for the square, with the stage facing this way, the food court around the stage, and other stalls behind that. So I think we have some lessons to learn from that. But yeah, the feedback seems to be generally positive.
Thank you. Yeah, I visited on 2 of the days, and I met both the actual organisers, so the market managers, as it were, and they were sort of very friendly, very helpful people, and they were explaining about how things were going on. Unfortunately, they got hit by some sort of adverse weather, showery, sort of cold weather, unfortunately. But despite that, on both occasions when I was there, it was very lively, and there were quite a few people there. The things that I wanted to know particularly was one, that the site was left pristine afterwards. We didn't have any litter to collect up. There wasn't any damage to anything at all. It was all, as I said, well laid out. I noted the stalls weren't too close together, so it allowed disabled access, emergency access to get through, allowed people to walk through the forecourt as well. Another thing that I wanted to make note of, the advertising that was put out in prominent positions, but it wasn't put out anywhere dangerous. It wasn't put out near roundabouts or actually sort of next to roads or something like that, or hanging off of anything at all. And all of those advertisements, which doesn't often happen with a lot of events, were all collected back in very promptly, and they were removed, and they were attached quite carefully with things like bungee clips and that, so as not to damage anything. So I saw it as a great potential for the town overall, and the town council. I think it was a great success, and I noticed from the statistics that the people that were asked about, the majority said that they would like to see more of these events happening. So I think it's a win-win situation. We should replicate it as many times as we possibly can. So.
Yeah, and I just wanted, I mean, I'm echoing what's been said, but over the Saturday and Sunday I decided myself to walk around. In advance of knowing about this survey, I actually went around the event on 2 days. I spoke to 46 different groups of people, from size of 2 up to one group was 10. So I spoke to groups that totalled over 100 people. Majority were from Sandwich. There were a number from Sandwich and neighbouring villages, but some people had travelled from as far as Faversham. One couple had come from Bexley, Ramsgate and Folkestone, so come a distance. All had been positive about the event. And some of the stats I got was, out of the 46 groups I talked to, 42 had only come to Sandwich because of the event. So that's a key point. It wasn't drawing them away from other things they might have done in the town. 29 of the groups that I engaged with were either eating food or drinking from the stalls, but none of them said they would have bought food elsewhere if it hadn't been at the event. 2 other groups were drinking coffee from Costa, as this was the closest place to purchase this. There wasn't a coffee stall on the event itself. And then just one group, which was a couple, had eaten previously at the Bell before coming to the event. So if I roll that up, it was a contained event. Everybody that I spoke to was very positive about it. Nobody indicated to me that they were drawn from spending money elsewhere as a consequence of being at the event.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I was a bit worried because I come on the Friday, and it absolutely teamed out on Friday, and then they had all this beautiful food there, and I thought, oh, but they would come back a couple of times on the Saturday, and it was heaving, wasn't it? It was really busy, and I was quite surprised.
Yeah.
So I think it's just a good event for Sandwich, to do it again. Yeah. I
Yeah,
thought
I
it was
was
keen to come
going
back.
to ask if we've had any response from the event organisers as to whether they wish to return and whether it was a success as far as they were concerned.
Yes, no, so it was a success. There was only one stallholder that didn't think they fit for the town. Everybody else would be more than happy to return. They are actually negotiating with Dover District at the moment, looking at the key ring for later this year. But they certainly would be happy to come back to the site here in the forecourt.
I was going to say that, I mean, one of the stalls that I thought was particularly nice was the one that was selling woolen goods from Romney Marsh, and we thought something, a wedding present for somebody, and I noticed that there were other sandwich people busy at that stall buying stuff. And it did strike me that perhaps if we edged up a bit in terms of the kinds of stalls that we get, or these event organisers could get. For example, I actually live opposite 2 wine merchants. Separately, they're separate. 2 women wine merchants, one of whom buys good but not very highly priced South African wine in very large quantities and sells to Tesco and places like that. The other one buys, I have to say, very, very high quality Bordeaux wines. Probably too expensive, but I think, you know, that perhaps we should aim for a more luxury, or these event organisers could be encouraged to aim for a more luxury end offer, and I think that might work. But anyway, that's just a suggestion.
I think there's an issue with the Hercules wine
that
store,
is
so that could be a problem.
It could be, yes.
But building on what Claire says, I think we should be proactive in terms of going back to them and actually saying, here's a part of the year that would you be interested in. So for example, in the lead up to Christmas or in November, so it might be an opportunity to ask them back again. So rather than wait to react, just see if they would entertain coming back.
There has been approach about that exact offer, but it does coincide with Christmas light switch on.
Does it?
So I need to obviously take that away and have a conversation.
Yeah, but that's really good that they are keen. But and for example, a lot Hercules that was mentioned.
Yes.
Why not invite them? You know,
Yes.
a little bit more flexibility around how you sell on the on the event.
Absolutely.
Well, I think the Thursday market is showing that some of the traders in the
They
town
are.
are now coming onto the square,
Yeah.
onto the forecourt, so that's a good thing. And it shows the potential for the Saturday market as well, which is a different client group, more touristy, visitor type people. But I just mentioned that I went 4 or 5 times over the course of the 3 days. I mean, the weather was atrocious, and if the weather had been much warmer, I think it would have been a much busier event. It was still fairly busy on the Saturday and Sunday. I think the other thing to say is that the money that they get from the stallholders is their only source of income, and they are charging roughly what the Folk and Ale charge for a stall. So some people were saying, oh, they're not. If you look at the actual budgetary side of it, their margins are fairly low, and they're also having to pay for all the setup and the music, which was really exceptionally good. I thought, really good musicians. So you know, I spoke to the organiser who was fairly positive. I spoke to a couple of other stallholders who were positive. I think this survey doesn't fully reflect some of the adverse comments that were being made online. There was one trader, for example, who, you know, is in the town, who was making negative comments, saying it was taking money away from their business. So I think if it happens again, we need to be saying to traders, see this as an opportunity.
Yeah.
You know, get yourself involved, put out some special offers, because this particular trader was not in competition with anything on the forecourt.
No.
There was no coffee or baguettes or bacon rolls or anything, or, you know, French croissants or anything like that.
And
So,
I would say, Colin, is that so a couple of where we did get some negative comments, I actually hand delivered the opportunity to respond. If they had, brilliant. If they hadn't, that's their choice.
yeah.
But I went out of the way to give them the opportunity and spoke to them about why it would be helpful to have a response. What we could add in next time is maybe a little bit of signage in terms of, you know, where your nearest coffee shops are or something. But it's not a requirement, but we might want to look at that.
Yeah, I entirely support the idea of encouraging local traders, local businesses to participate in this kind of event. We can help to act as the go-between, if you like, between the organisers and local businesses, and we can encourage local businesses to jump at the opportunity, because it does attract a lot of visitors. They are customers who wouldn't normally come here, and the more they can be encouraged to come and visit regularly, and the more that local traders can profit from that, the better.
I mean, anything that encourages more footfall has to be good, generally. If people are there in direct competition with people in the town, then surely they're all, if the cake is bigger, then they can all get a slightly bigger slice of the cake.
But I don't know to what extent the problem was. First of all, this was planned in advance by certain interests. But now that people have seen that it can be a success, I think that may be something and the hook on which to bring more of the local traders in. Because honestly, this was a pretty risky adventure in March. We saw what happened with the weather, and it was terrible on Friday. But if you can get these numbers in on a bad day, if everyone's pulling together, and you're lucky with the weather, which in Britain is a bit dodgy, that there is much more opportunity. I think it's this thing about trying to get more people in to say, look, this worked, can you benefit more from this? Because one of the questions I've got is there any idea of overall numbers increase in the town? And obviously we don't have that data. I think one place says it collects data, but I've never seen it.
So I think the key stat on here is number 7 with you know, the pie chart, which says 41 says they'd like to see more events like this in Sandwich. 19 say no, so double, and then 17 maybe in between. So I think that's a vote of confidence overall. So given it was a bad weather event as well, so that did take the edge off it. I think overall my view would be that this committee should recommend to full council that future applications be looked upon favourably.
Yes,
And that we work with the town clerk and the calendar, and you know, if there are gaps in the calendar, we can consider an application.
Last thing I was just going to say is trying to make it as amenable as possible for the organisers as well, because Maris and I were down in Hive, and we saw exactly the same being advertised down in Hive, Feastable, by the same company. So they obviously have different events at different places, and with all due respects, if we don't make them feel comfortable coming here and, you know, and support them, then they've got lots of options to go elsewhere. So, and quite possibly if the weather is exceptionally good, are we able to do some sort of package with Cowley's Meadow to say that we could you know, rent that to them for parking and also for the traders' vehicles. So, because obviously all those traders had to have vehicles, so we're, you know, apart from parking them in the Guildhall car park,
which cause problems.
which is very expensive and causes problems. I mean, the Cowleith Meadow is only a less than 10 minutes walk if you know where to go, so it could all be signposted, and perhaps that might bring more people in. The one thing we are well known for in DDC is very high parking prices, so unfortunately.
And the final point on this is that it also raised money for the council.
Indeed, that's most important.
So can we agree that we make a recommendation to council that we look favourably on future?
Yeah, I'd like
Is
to
that
recommend that.
Is that
Yeah.
all in favour of that?
Yeah.
Thank you. And thanks to Lindsay for the survey.
That's good.
Item 8 is the market update. Town clerk to share a verbal update on the Thursday market. Councillor Shuker to report on a proposal for a Saturday market.
Okay, thank you, Chair. So I'm sure those of you who frequent the Thursday market have noticed the gazebos. They have made a big impact on the traders, and it has actively encouraged new stallholders to approach us. We do currently have a bit of a waiting list, so I know that in the summer we're at capacity now, so all the 12 gazebos are used. I think last week we had one that was empty, but on the whole, the 12 are being used now consistently for about 4 or 5 weeks. And our assistant caretaker is doing a fabulous job of getting up and making sure that all the gazebos are out all together. And I have to say, the formation of them now, he's got it all really slickly. It's an operation, but he's approached it in a really methodical manner, and it does now really look fantastic when you come past the market. So the good news is we're growing the number of stalls. Gazebos are all being welcomed and making a difference, and there will be a report coming to council on Monday with an update and a proposal for a Saturday market. So I'll hand you over to Councillor Sue.
Thank you. Sorry, I've been suffering from a cold. So yes, I've got a report that I will be taking to the Town Council on Monday, and it's proposing the reintroduction of a Saturday market. Obviously, the backdrop to that is the need to increase the income from the forecourt. We have previously had Saturday markets on the forecourt. The last time was in the summer of 2022, when it ran for a number of weeks. Picking up on the fact that the Thursday market is buoyant now, and there are inquiries coming through on a regular basis. Now is probably the time to test whether a Saturday market is appropriate again. But in terms of what the proposal will outline, it's very much about keeping it simple and in line with the Thursday market. So we haven't got market manager employed. So what I will be asking is that we apply the rules that we've already agreed as a council for the Thursday market, with any slight tweakings that we need to reflect it on the weekend. The intention again in the proposal is that the market would operate from around 8:30 in the morning through to 1:30 in the afternoon, so not a full day market, but just concentrated on those hours, with a setup beforehand for the hour and a half, and then close down for the hour or so afterwards. One of the things I think it gives us an opportunity to do is to ensure that no vehicles are on the forecourt unless they are specifically around the business that's being delivered. On the forecourt, whilst the market is in operation, there is a little bit of shading at the moment by some stallholders on Thursdays, which isn't really ideal in terms of people walking through the market itself. What the proposal will be for the first 4 weeks is that the market rates would mirror the Thursday rates. If we find that, heaven forbid, we're overrun with applicants to run stalls, then we can review those rates at the end of the 4 weeks. But it will mirror, to start with, the Thursday charges. One of the key things that will be in the report is that the payments will be via backs, not via cash, which is what happens on Thursdays. That recognises two things. One, it recognises the fact that we won't have staff to collect money on the weekend. The other thing it really gives us an opportunity is to collect the money in advance at the start of the week. So if we find there are any gaps that any market stallholder who we're expecting hasn't paid, we can follow them up, and if they don't want to come, if we have got some reserve market stallholders, we can go to them and say, do you want to pick up that place that's available? One cost of this is the fact that because it is the weekend and because we wouldn't look to get Simon to do the setting up and taking down, we would need to look at employing casual resource just for the setting up and taking down element. In terms of overseeing the market during its open hours, one of the stall holders has already agreed that they would be willing on a fortnightly basis, because that's the frequency they can attend, that they would oversee the market. They themselves have previously run markets. I am willing to fill in the other Saturday that's vacant, and if another councillor wants to join me and do that, that would be really appreciated. Then we can share the load on that. But what we wouldn't want is a different councillor turning up every Saturday, because key stallholders like to be cared for, we like to be known, be seen as valuable. So it's about a relationship with the stallholders rather than just a council turning up. It won't operate on the weekends of events. That's a key thing that won't happen. And the intention in the paper is to propose that we run it from the first week in June, which follows an event, sorry, the second weekend in June after the weekend, and then run it through to the end of October, but not on the weekends when there are events. Does that make sense? The key thing though from doing Saturday market is the amount of effort we as a council put into getting it up and running. So people will not just turn up. We need to think about how we market it, how we mail shot existing likely contenders, how we might even want to approach festivals that are happening locally or other markets. If we put some effort in, we may get a return from that. If we just leave it as an offer via Facebook, for example, we'll get a response to that level. And that's it in a nutshell. So there is a proposal. It is to run only for the summer season. It is light touch. It won't be themed markets because all of that involves effort. We really haven't got the resource to do that. And we'll look at what we can take from the Thursday market to complement on a Saturday. One of the things that we do need to make sure we don't do is compromise any of the local businesses in terms of stall holders on a Saturday. So that needs to be factored into any stall holders, which I'm sure Jill will take account of.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, because this is a sort of an experimental methodology, as it were, taking on second, would we be able to sort of perhaps collect some data on the market, number of stalls, possibly with a clicker or something? Perhaps we could get a rough idea of the number of visitors and things like that. It seems ideal that for the Saturday thing we could actually come back here with similar sort of statistics as the festival had, so that we can report back and say, right from June to September or whatever, we had X number of market stalls on these days.
I'm sure you haven't read my report, but I have written it and it's with the town clerk, so I'm not going to add that in. What it has got is a review point at the September STC presenting all that information.
Yeah. But I just thought it'd be ideal because it's like launching a new project, so we could take that data and then we could evaluate, couldn't we, next year, do we do it for longer or whatever like that. Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to say that if this works, and I really hope it does, I do think it's a selling point for Sandwich, and that we should develop a leaflet that can be distributed to Canterbury hotels and B&Bs, other residential tourist outlets roundabout. I speak from experience, very recent experience of an idyllic week in France, and one of the really helpful things that we were handed at the place that we were staying was a list of the local markets and when they were held, what their times were, and it was a delight to go from market town to market town, all of them beautiful, and find a very nice place to eat. And Sandwich could do that, particularly at the weekend. And so I think, and also, you know, it does, because we won't be able to offer tourist information on Saturday, at the moment anyway, it does knock on to a need for, which I think is urgent, some sort of electronic information board, 3 of them, I would hope, one at the quay, one at the forecourt and one at the station, which, you know, would advertise the other delights of Sandwich.
Yeah, just a comment and a question. You mentioned the idea of specialist markets. There are companies around that will organise a specialist market for you, so that you don't have to do it from scratch. The question is, are there other markets in this area that are open on a Saturday? So who would we be competing with?
Yes. Yes is the answer.
4 miles in that direction.
Yeah. So the deal market is a very successful market, but it's very different. So it's interesting that one of the stall holders I was speaking to recently said that they deliberately do not go to deal now because of how it operates, not in terms of the management, but in terms of the footfall is so intense that actually they prefer coming to Sandwich. So the Sandwich market will be different. Deal is very concentrated, it's very heavy in terms of people who visit there. And we're starting off on a journey, Martin, so I think we start to grow something ourselves, but yes, there is competition.
So I've got a couple of points. One is, I think markets come under this committee. So I think it would have been preferable if your report came here first, because this committee is meant to, you know, we've spent 15 minutes on this, and I don't think we should spend another 15 or 20 minutes at council going over the same ground. So it's better that it's discussed here and then a recommendation. Okay, so that's one point. I think it's great, the Saturday market. I think it's obviously aiming at a different client group. So whether the hours do they need to be the same as the Thursday market, or perhaps more 10 till 4, because visitors are here throughout the day. That's something worth thinking about. And the other thing is, for some time I felt we should, as a council, should produce a leaflet that goes through every door in the town, promoting the Thursday market, the shops, the Saturday market if it was set up. Yeah. Because a lot of people in this town never come into the town centre, especially in the south side. Because maybe they think there's nothing happening here, or there's nothing worth coming for. So I think just promoting the market would be a good idea. And also I think, is it worth a letter going to all of the shops in the town, the relevant shops, saying, look, we're setting up a Saturday market, you know, Rose and Tony's, for example, why don't they have a stall? Hercules, as you said earlier, just to get that different. We're not talking about fruit and veg and meat and flat, you know, we're talking about more visitor friendly stuff like knickknacks and souvenirs and vintage clothing and wine, perhaps, and more upmarket food.
So I think in terms of contact of local shops, that was definitely in my mind as something that we need to do in that 5-week window in preparation, because we shouldn't do it in isolation from talking to shopkeepers to lay any fears.
And that will make them feel more you know, favourable towards them.
I was just going to say on a Saturday, King Street shuts. A lot of those shops actually have tables outside, don't they? So,
Sign directing to King Street as well.
Yeah. But there's a few antique shops in the town, for example.
There are
Maybe
now.
they've got smaller, you know, objet that they could have on a table and sell to visitors.
I think also, I was just going to say, I think also it's fulfilling what this council should be doing on a number of terms. One, providing, you know, if we've got fresh fruit and vegetables and things like that, which is fulfilling well-being of people, because, I mean, really, apart from, say, like the co-op or something, it's very difficult to get fresh fruit and vegetables and eggs and fresh meat, fresh fish. I mean, well, you can't get fresh fish, can you, in Sandwich, unless there's a market stall selling it. So I think that's very important. So that's the well-being of the residents of Sandwich. Second thing that it's doing, which you know, Sandwich Town Council should be promoting anyway, is the promotion of smaller economy and quite possibly even start-ups. And I know a number of organisations that are now in shops or places like that. I mean, even just to cite one of them, we had the owners of the drill hall, and they started off with a pizza van on the forecourt, and now look what's happened to that. They've successfully run the drill hall for this number of years. So giving the opportunity for smaller ventures and people to actually do startups and grow things, that's promoting the economy of the town. So I think it's important that the town council is seen to be doing that and giving as much advantage as possible to its residents. So.
You must have read my report, because again, within there is an argument of why, more from a macro perspective, why a market works. One of the points made is about it becoming a feeder for people starting up and being able to expand their business in the future.
Great minds think alike.
But you could also have things like nail, you know, browns and, you know, more fun things like clairvoyance.
I
didn't see that.
I bet that wasn't in your report.
Anyway, so that's coming next week. Thank you for the update. Any other comments? Move on.
Sorry, Colin. My plea as always is we must do something about the signs for the market as you come into the town. It is dreadful, and we've got to do something about that. And there's no point in doing all this for a Saturday market if that's what people come to when they come into the town.
They've gone. I've taken them.
They've been uprooted.
I've been away recently.
Yes. Yeah, you will not see them again. I did protecting everybody involved. I did speak to the previous owner of those signs, and they were happy for me to remove them. So I did the second one at the weekend.
I'm your witness on that. I was there when you spoke.
You were. Thank you. Thank you.
Yes.
Okay. So next is item 9, bookings for the Guildhall. Town clerk to share a brief report on the current gaps for regular hires at the Guildhall, weddings booked to date, and estimated income is included. This is attachment 4. Any comments on this? I asked for this report. I think what I would like to see in due course is a more comprehensive schedule of the number of bookings by day, the income that generates, and the potential for additional income in the future. And I think maybe this is something that the Finance and Assets Working Group could look at with the RFO. Maybe we could think of that. Because I think in the light of the discussion and the decision on Bay Hall, we need to think about promoting the Guildhall, making sure it's being used to maximum capacity and we're getting as much income as possible, as well as looking at utilities and bills and everything else. Councillor Black.
Yeah, I'm glad to see that we've, you know, there are a fairly large number of weddings booked in. And most of these, I think, are Saturdays, aren't they? do we actually, sorry,
I was going to say there's some Fridays as well. I'm going
Some
to just take the one today for, I think it's the 18th of December, it's quite an obscure date. But yeah, so majority are on a Saturday, and that's obviously the preferred day. But I think since COVID, people have been much more flexible about the days as well. Yeah.
do we know if we actually make a net profit? Because obviously we've got additional costs, and you know, you're here as well sometimes as well, if not every time, and it's a long day. I'm just wondering about, are we actually making money off it? We're using facilities, and that's really excellent, but are we making money?
Well, it's difficult at the moment because until I sit down and have time and capacity to look at utilities, you know, I could estimate costs for that. Staff, because as you say, it's a long day. That's why I've been coming in part of the day. I don't record those hours, so I'm giving those hours for free. But it does stretch caretaking, because if you were talking about being on site from 9 in the morning till midnight, that's too long for one person to do. So it does have to be 2 caretakers or a split shift. And we did one weekend a couple of weeks ago, maybe 3 of us did it. We you know, did it into thirds. But you're right, we need to look at the higher costs, because it's incredible. This space is so fantastic. You know, when you look around what's here, and it's, the fees are not, I in my opinion, don't reflect what you're getting.
Having just had a daughter's wedding, I'll let me stress, there were 3 people were fully extended that day, and you know, we have to take cognizance of that. You're also working 5 days a week, if not more. Okay, so could we say possibly in about 6 months' time, or the end of this year, we might be able to get a better idea?
Yes.
And then that can look at what's happening with fees.
Yeah, I think it's important to review the fees.
Doesn't the hirers have to provide their own security? The stewards?
No. Well, they do.
So you shouldn't,
right.
you shouldn't be able to have managed during the day, you know what I mean? You should be, in fact, unlock, set it up, and then you can split shift and come back, lock up. So they should have stewards during the day, which they provide.
No, for fire hazard and everything else, for our insurance purposes, somebody has to be on site. We're responsible for the building. So if somebody's hiring it, they will have the right, a steward potentially. Somebody, I mean, what a lot of people do is they tend to hire in a bar, so that the bar, because you know, on your wedding or your party event, I don't think you'd want to be the responsible person for any circumstances like that. So yes, there does need to be a member of staff on site all the time.
It can never used to. No.
Well, I can't comment on what used to happen, but that is the case now. We must have somebody on site, you know, in case of anything happens, you know, it could be a fire or...
Are they paid at normal rates or overtime?
So it is time off in lieu, or so there are accruing hours that obviously then we need to give
normal
back.
Hours or?
Yes, normal hours, because the majority, I think some of the older contracts used to be double time on Sunday. We're working towards resolving that.
So when I looked at it, I thought, great opportunity to use it as a springboard for what we want to do about this, because many people talk about this building as being a white elephant, but actually it's also a gem, and we're just not promoting it at all. And that isn't about the current, this is, you know, this is a long term, I hate saying inherited, but people say all you do is talk about the past, but actually we're starting from where we are here today. So we need to take some time rather than dive in and say the quick fix is X, Y and Z. I think we need a strategy about this building. We need to talk about 24 wedding bookings might seem good, but what was it last year? What was it, you know, what are we aiming for this year? What is the income that we put into our budget we're expecting from bookings? So there's a whole piece here around how we manage this as a facility for people to book it. And as Jill mentioned, we need to look at the charges as well. So I think there's a piece here that we don't start today, we don't start tomorrow, but we actually recognise we want to do it in a measured way and start it at some point in a couple of months' time and get 2 or 3 people looking at it and actually coming out with a strategy for this building.
And I think when we look at fees, so the courtroom is £400, I think, for haven't they? Should know. But then it's not just about the income, it's what's the cost on top of that, utilities, staffing. And so what's the net income? That's what we need to look at.
I was just going to ask about, in the absence, obviously, because what we're all talking about is what would be the remit of the assets officer, and of course we haven't got one yet, and it might be at least 2 months before we do get one. But for these sort of what I call lull periods, you know, Mondays, Wednesdays and Fridays, you know, perhaps we ought to have like an initiative to try and get bookings for those. Now, okay, you won't get weddings and things like that, but quite often there's quite a number of people in the town who are doing smaller activities, such as you know, like yoga or Pilates or I don't know, martial arts, all sorts of things like that. Now, a lot of them may be put off because if anybody looks at this building from the outside, I won't use the terminology used like elephant, but it's a monolith of a building, and I for one would be very, you know, worried to walk in that door and say, could you rent me a room so that I could do my sort of pastel colour painting classes like that, because you'd be scared off. So if possibly we could also do something where we could encourage people to come in to do those crafts, activities, sports, leisure, and possibly on some sort of tapered fee paying thing. So because they'd be unsure how many people are going to do pastel drawing or whatever like that, possibly we could start them off on a 50% rental, 75%, 100%, like that sort of thing, to encourage people in. I mean, this building on a Monday, Wednesday and Friday, I believe the heating, the lighting, the toilets, the staff are all still here on those tight days. So those costs need to be covered. And I think that either this committee or a separate working group needs to look at an initiative until we've got an assets manager.
Yes, I was going to say, I don't think we should think just about the historic parts of the building. We do now have a really useful space called the Hub. And I've been thinking about how we might hire out the Hub, and I think one of the obvious uses would be for hot desking and people working from home, but also wanting the companionship which paid work provides for most people. But that's the only use I can think of. Also, obviously, for small meetings, the kind of thing that activity that Councillor Carter was talking about, you know, art, because it's very well lit. That room. So I think we should definitely look at the historic parts, but also consider the less intimidating historic parts and see what we can do with them.
One of the things that when we were talking about the Maddox report was a claim, and we don't know how true it was, that a number of venues in the town were actually fairly expensive. Picking up partly on what the Mayor was saying, and there may be an issue of pricing if it's a difficult one because you don't want to undercut other places like St Clement's and so on, but there may well be some areas, especially at the slack periods, although Monday morning is going to be a pretty dead period for almost everything I can think of. But look, if the managed issues were in part people seeking smaller, cheaper venues, it may be something worth exploring. The trouble is how many rooms have we got that are suitably small? Because even the Hub, you know, if we had the standing orders working group and 4 of us were rattling around like peas in a pot, you know.
One simple measure, because I looked at in preparation for this on the website, we're not doing ourselves a service at all in terms of how we're advertising this building. The photographs aren't best quality, they are dated, so we've just inherited what was previously there. It needs a refresh, but also not just about new photographs, we need again about strategy. How do we promote it as an availability? Videos on the website, for example, another obvious thing in terms of a walk around. So there's so many opportunities, but it all means time and pressure on us to do it. So I think we just do it in a measured way and get it right.
I think some of this will wait for the assets officer, but I think in the short term, you know, just a simple notice on the Facebook and website saying, you know, if you're interested in booking space, we have it for groups. Perhaps in the longer term, the hub as a home working place where people can book online. You know, they book a slot for a morning or an afternoon, or
It needs to be fitted up, you know, with
Yeah.
enough points.
and where they can get access without bothering staff. So that's worth thinking about. So, if there's no other comments, could we note this report and perhaps ask the town clerk just to put out a notice, you know, a brief notice saying, have you thought about, if you're looking for a space, look.
If we're going to do
look at
that,
the
and if we're
other-
going to do it on social media, let's make it visual. So let's look at maybe taking some more photographs ourselves, because people get drawn to photographs rather than just words.
Yeah.
Good idea, yeah.
Because probably most people don't even know the hub is there, is
No,
it?
yeah.
Exactly. And set it up in a way that actually looks like it's a working space.
That could be maybe something Lindsay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You've had the video of the hygiene packs.
There's an idea.
Okay, so that report is to note, I think.
Yes.
That's right.
Happy to note it. All in favour? Yeah. The next one is fees for the forecourt square. Councillor Wiles to share a brief report and draft letter proposing consultation with event organisers for fees. I mean, you'll be aware of the history of this, that we had a meeting last year, I think in November, with the event organisers, and there was some fuss about suddenly charging, because historically we've never charged for events, but clearly we now have this loan where we have to get some income back. So for this current year, we've agreed that 4 events, long-standing traditional events, will not pay the higher commercial rate. One of those events, one of the other events, is paying the higher rate, and the festival has already paid the higher rate. So what I'm suggesting is that we don't let this thing drift, because we'll fall into difficulty if we do that, because next year will be around before we've even thought about it. So I'm proposing that we just write to all of the event organisers, the ones we know of, to say this is what we're proposing, that those 4 continue to get the lower rate because they're long-standing, highly regarded events. So long as their non-profit status remains unchanged, they will get. But anyone else will have to prove that they are a CIO, a charity, or a community interest company, and to prove that they are not making profits for anyone, that all the money is being recycled within the event and for the benefit of the town. So that's my proposal, and that we send that out. I'm happy for it to go in my name or in the name of the town clerk, and that if necessary we have a meeting with the events organisers to talk about those principles. If need be, we need to be fairly robust about the need for income.
Couple of, I read it very carefully, and I think it's very good. I think there's a few tweaks that you might make. Partly is me being a pedant, but partly also is me saying we should make it clear it's not this town council that took the loan out, and I think that's an extremely important point to make. When I say this town, obviously the legal entity continues, but it was a different administration. On the second page, I think there's a couple of wording issues that could be cleared up, and I'm happy to do them offline.
Okay. If you send that into
I'll
the
send
town
it
clerk.
to Jill and yourself.
Yeah.
Okay.
Okay.
And I do have one last point, which is in this, gotta go now, make a lead balloon. Are we seriously saying that we stick with these extremely low fees in perpetuity, or do we have some process of gradually increasing the fees for these 4 things? Because it does strike me they should be able to, if given sufficient notice, that we should have a slow increase of fees, and that doesn't come through at all. It comes almost in perpetuity, which I'm sure what you've not intended, but equally you don't want to go with it.
No, I think
but how?
it's a fair point. I think fees generally need to be reviewed every budget cycle. And we
It does say that in this letter. It says they're to be reviewed annually.
Yeah,
So,
but it's preceded by a whole spiel about how we're keeping these ones. Can I do some wording offline and send it to you, some suggestions?
But if, Councillor Pennington.
Well, I had a similar point to Councillor
The
Black.
intention will be to review these annually.
Sorry, have I got the floor?
there's Councillor Pennington.
I was going to make a similar point to Councillor Black, that it seems very black and, sorry. We have 4 festivals on one side and everybody else, but even some festivals that were already making a contribution. And I do think there should be some scope for quickly phasing in a universal approach.
So I think in terms of addressing that, what we've tried to do is find a middle ground here. It was very contentious, Martin, in terms of the original discussions. I think what this does is recognise that these 4 events are long-standing, they do contribute to the town, but then it keeps a process for anybody else that is new through the door, has a simple process that they need to adhere to, so not making it complicated, not producing accounts, etc., just showing their registration will enable them to be at the lower rate. I'm not sure that we have the appetite necessarily for going back to those 4 and unpicking where I think we probably need to go, which is saying we recognise the value, let's keep them on, recognised as not-for-profit, because there were a number of consequences that came out in the discussions that they weren't willing to necessarily follow for maybe valid reasons. And this is a compromise that at least lets us move forward. I don't disagree with what you're saying, but when we're talking about 4 events,
See what the current situation is that those 4 they're all unincorporated community organisations, so they don't have any formal legal status. Some of them produce accounts, and what we were proposing is that their accounts be independently examined, i.e. by an accountant who is not connected to that organisation in any way. So you're starting to complicate things for yourself once you start looking at who's examining the accounts and you find that actually they are connected or there's some family connection. So it becomes complicated, so that it just seemed an easier
more
compromise,
more balance,
pragmatic approach to say these 4 have been in the town for many, many years. They all contribute to footfall and to business, so let's give them a heads up and say that they will pay the lower rate. The rate might not just increase with inflation, because I think now we've established the principle of charging. There's no reason why we can't make those charges above inflation over years, so that we start to recoup more income.
Yes, I'm concerned that these 4 festivals, they bring a lot of people into the town, but the people who come use the facilities of the town, including public conveniences, and there are costs to the town council which are actually rather considerable, both in terms of expenditure and in terms of staff morale. And I don't think, obviously £25 doesn't cover that at all. And I think they operate without taking account of how they generate costs for the town council, and that I think is unfortunate. which is why I'm saying it in public, and hopefully one or two of them are listening. So I do think that perhaps not just in the long run, but in the short run, we do actually have to find a way of charging them a fee which reflects the costs of the town council.
I think it's a bit like the argument about, you know, the British Museum and the National Gallery, isn't it? People coming from abroad use it for free. Some people think that's unfair. Why should I, the taxpayer? But, you know, they're spending money elsewhere. They're bringing money into the city and to pubs and hotels and everything else.
Yeah, I'm just going to say, Chair, that in that first paragraph, you know, it says the Sandwich Town Council took out a loan of 350,000. Could you just say in like 20?
Yeah, I think
21.
Yes.
Yeah.
it's a fair point.
It means we've had nearly 4 years. It's only now we're starting to get an income, isn't it?
Yeah.
So we've been paying that. I'm not quite sure the actual years. The town clerk will have to verify it.
Keep it simple, yeah.
Yeah, keep it simple.
So just picking up, I think Claire makes a very valid point. So what we should do, I think, is actually, rather than abstractly talk about it, we should capture what those costs are. So we actually then have our baseline, that we then have a conversation as a council about what we see as a reasonable cost, rather than saying we spend money. There are things that we can identify very clearly in terms of staffing, etc., that we should put a monetary item to them. The second point, Colin, is we have an opportunity this year to get it right around Cowley's Meadow. So we need to not miss this opportunity of capturing information to inform the right set of decisions for next year about that facility being available as a paid for car park. Now that means we need to know how many cars are using it, because it gives us options. Do we employ a third party to manage it, or do we do it within a volunteer resource within, you know, our community or close by community? There is another avenue of revenue that if it was a charge of, say, 50% of what you'd have to pay in the town, is we're giving some leeway back to the users, but we're also generating income for the town council. It's a free car park, and that can't be right in the sense of the councils, unfortunately. One of the easiest routes to generate money is car parking.
I think the bowling club used it, they paid for the mowing, didn't they?
Oh, I'm not
Not
sure.
now,
So it was
not
before
No,
my.
they have it now because
Yeah.
it's all up in the air.
Yeah.
But I think that's what they do, and they were using it for their, you know, and the festivals and all like that. So they were having it all cut.
I just wanted to say one final note, was this matter of the accounts. I think that is very, very important. I know a lot of these organisations are quite small revenue, small turnover, what have you, but I think it's important to look at the accounts, because quite often a lot of these organisations are sitting on funds that they stockpile, and I know this, the number of organisations I've belonged to in this town, and when I've joined the organisation and then they've done their annual end of year accounts and they've said, oh, we've got, you know, £37,000 in the bank, but we're barely breaking even on the balance sheet, you know, well, this isn't right. And we had a similar option here, which luckily we stood up to. I won't mention any names, where an organisation wanted to rent a room inside the Guildhall, sort of in December last year, and when we reviewed their accounts, there was considerable amounts of funding in reserves in those accounts. So this council shouldn't be seen as a sort of milk machine that, you know, although these other organisations are sitting on large sums of money, they can get our resources and services at a cheaper rate. So I would like to see this evaluation of costs so that we can go back and say, well, you're getting it for this much a day, but it's actually costing us in real terms this much.
I think the problem with scrutinising accounts, it starts to get muddy and complicated and argumentative.
My personal views in terms of accounts is when organisations come for grants. That's when we need to have that information. We analyse it. I think if somebody comes through the door and says, I want to make a booking for an activity, an event, we don't go down to that level of detail because we shouldn't be disinteresting people, organisations to make bookings. We keep the process simple because they're coming through the door to use our facilities. But when it's grants, we are not on the ball yet properly in terms of looking at things like accounts.
So can we leave this that Councillor Black will send a few tweaks to the letter, but we approve the letter?
No, sorry, I can't do that. I was going to say my second point was I can't approve something that's going to be amended afterwards. I don't think anybody in this room could. So whether it's circled round separately, I've got 100% trust in Councillor Black, but either it's got to be circulated afterwards electronically, or we say, you know, that, well, we can't say anything until we've seen the final version.
I'm happy to do that. I mean, there might tweaks. It's about, I think the wording is slightly, can be construed in two ways. My learned friend and I would criticise it further.
It's the Scottish version.
In groats. No pounds.
Councillor Black will circulate the letter with amendments and give a deadline for comments.
I would suggest the comment comes back to you two folks. It's just that you may totally disagree with what I'm suggesting. And I suggest you folks should be the final arbiters, because it's going in your name.
The changes you're proposing are not of any great significance.
It's the wording of, you know, it implies one thing, but I think it means something slightly different. It's only, I think, two sentences.
So can we not agree this letter on the basis that there are not going to be any changes of significance? It's just tweaks to words and putting in the date of the loan.
Sure. I'm happy to leave it to your discretion to decide when you see them whether they need full approval by the committee or not.
Otherwise we're in a kind of circle of hell, aren't we? 22 here.
Can I just tell you what they are then?
That's what I was just going to say.
Cut to the chase.
Let's agree on them now.
I just was trying not to be the pedant, but obviously I've got to.
There you are.
You do it so well.
Thank you.
Okay. So the date of the loan goes in at the beginning.
I think so.
Yeah. Okay.
All
Is that
right.
agreed?
Yes, carry on.
You're leaving the room, aren't you?
Well, let's just pull this one up. Sorry about this, folks. And of course, the squirrel's gone to sleep in the machine. Come on. Just a moment, let me just pull it up. Bum, 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 bum. Oh, it goes through the whole flipping thing now. I shouldn't have closed it down, should I? Here we go. Here we go. Fees, sorry. Fees. It's gone through the whole startup side. Just a moment. It's the letter. Where was it? What minute was it in? Was it in the minutes? In the
Yes, it was.
right. Sorry, I've got it now. I've got it in the agenda. Yeah. Okay. Attachment 5, fees to the forecourt square. Yeah, sorry. I've got it. Just one moment. Bear with me for a second, please. Yeah. What I was going to say is, if you look at the second page, fees for both commercial events and non-profit based events are reviewed annually. I'll put a full stop there. And then the application from 2025 onward must prove their status, because it's sort of, you've got two separate things. You're going to review it annually, but also you now want a slightly better scrutiny, right? And then I also, that I think was the main thing, is that it seemed to flow on, whereas I don't think it flows on fees for commercial events and non-profit based events are reviewed annually, full stop. And then you have the criteria that fees might need to increase. And I think that really is the only kind of thing, and the bit about the previous administration. So it's a pretty minor point.
Okay.
Right.
So with that change, are you happy to approve the letter?
Yes.
Proposed?
Yeah.
Second.
Yeah, I'll second it.
I've used a lot of comments.
Right, so that's agreed. So that will go in the,
Vote for that. Get rid of it.
so that's agreed, that letter can go out.
Yeah.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll amend it and circulate it a few days before it goes out, just in case there's any.
Can I just ask, does that clear up the action that we agreed, which was that by September we'd go back and look at the charging regime for events?
Yes.
Does that clear that? There's nothing else that we had.
That's agreed.
And can I also ask that we arrange a meeting for the events organisers well in advance, you know, sort of autumn, you know, August, September at the latest, I would suggest, to explain about the following year, what we're proposing to do. So let's not go through the same scenario of barricades in the streets and Molotov cocktails.
I think that last line could be amended to say, we propose meeting with you in September or the autumn
Yes.
to talk about
Yeah.
the fee charging regime in the future.
Then the trouble is you have to be careful of Christmas lights, because Councillor Marie said leaving it too late
Yeah.
for the Christmas lights. That's why I was saying September at the latest.
But when would, I mean, presumably at this meeting you would want to present a council decision, which was Councillor Stewart's point. And we normally meet the last, or at the end of the month.
Yeah.
So if we say we're meeting them in September, we have to decide it
In
in
August.
July.
July.
Yeah, July, August,
Or
yeah.
if we need it in August.
Or we'll just
Okay, so if you're happy with that.
But, sorry, just thinking it through laterally, the fees are already agreed for this year, so the Christmas lights are paying the fees for this
I
year.
agree.
The fees that we want to look at are for next year,
Exactly.
and they should and must be part of the budget setting process rather than being separate. And we need a bit of time. So I would suggest actually it's towards the end of the calendar year in time for the budget setting.
I think if we say autumn,
Yes.
at that stage, we can then, any feedback we get from that meeting can go into the budget process.
Yeah.
The RFO usually does start in October.
Yeah.
So she does
That's
start
right,
in
October, November.
That's
the budget setting. It's a very long process.
So that's the autumn.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we know what the autumn is?
Well, that's a question.
Are you saying the fall or the autumn?
Is it
With
sex-
climate change, who knows?
Yeah, who knows? I think October is the autumn, so we'll say the autumn.
Yeah.
just to be-
We're currently in BST, but if you went outside, you couldn't go outside without a coat.
Nathan.
Right, so that concludes that item. Date of next meeting, to be confirmed.
Yes.
Is that coming in the schedule next week?
I've got a meeting scheduled, whether council want to approve it or not, I'm waiting to be seen.
Okay, thank you all. That went on longer than I thought it would.